Welcome to Lead and Follow, a podcast that explores how great collaboration actually happens. I'm your host, Sharna Fabiano, author of the book Lead and Follow, The Dance of Inspired Teamwork. And I'm pleased to bring you the latest research, insights, and learning methods to help you work together better with the people around you. I help founders, solopreneurs, and new leaders become great at collaborating because I've seen how much more becomes possible when people integrate their ideas, perspectives, and strengths in a practical way. To learn more about coaching with me and for a one-time discount on your first session, go to sharnafabiano.com/coaching and enter the promo code podcast. The link is in the show notes. And now, here's the episode. Today, I'm very honored to speak with Dr. Eran Magen. Dr. Magen earned his MA in Education and Ph.D. in Psychology from Stanford University, completed post-doctoral training in population health as a Robert Wood Johnson Health and Society Scholar, and served as the research director for the University of Pennsylvania's Department of Counseling and Psychological Services. Dr. Magen is the founder of Early Alert, which works with universities, hospitals, public schools, and first responder agencies to prevent suicide and promote wellness among students and employees. Dr. Magen's work has been published in top-tier scientific journals, including Psychological Science, Emotion, and Academic Pediatrics, and has been cited in popular media ranging from Allure magazine to Psychology Today. He is a member of the JED Foundation's advisory board and the founder of Parenting for Humans, a relationship-first, trauma-informed approach to parenting that helps parents build stronger, more joyful relationships with their children and with themselves. Today, I'm really looking forward to hearing some of his insights around supportive listening and how the right balance of leading and following helps us form healthy human relationships. Eran, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Sharna.
You're very welcome. To get us started here, I'd love for you to share a little bit about yourself and how you got interested in the kind of work that you do.
So by way of brief background, I was born in LA, actually, and then grew up in Israel. Both my parents are Israeli, and I grew up there and then did my military service there and then moved to the U.S., to New York City, and did social work for a while there, working with homeless folks, and then went on to graduate school. And in the course of doing graduate school in education and then psychology, got very interested in how people can help people without getting special training and doing therapy or crisis support or anything like that, just because we all interact with one another all the time, and how can we help one another? And from that got even more interested in just how relationships form and develop and what gets people to a point where they trust each other and want to cooperate and collaborate, and the many different parts of life where this happens, right? Work and at home and with pets, and increasingly I think about also with ourselves. We have a relationship with ourselves, and we can think about how we relate to other people and how we relate ourselves, how we lead and follow other people, and how we lead and follow ourselves.
Thank you for that. You know, I'm really struck by the phrase you used, people helping people, and your comment about how we often assume help is this professional service or something that requires advanced training, such as a therapist or a teacher or a coach. And of course, those roles are very important and the expertise is very valuable. But I don't want to forget that, on the other hand, we all also have this innate human capacity to help one another. And I just would love to hear you say a little more about how you think about people helping people.
You know, first, in terms of the specialization, so my PhD is in psychology, and I think getting a PhD in psychology is a lot like getting a PhD in breathing, because everybody does it. You know, we all look at people and try to understand what's going on and think about ourselves a lot. And, you know, we all do psychology all the time. It's just, you know, like you can learn really specific techniques for breathing and when to breathe in certain ways and so on if you get a PhD in breathing. And psychology is kind of like, there are also other tidbits. I mean, there's content, obviously, that you'll learn, but in terms of the relating to people part, this is something that we do all the time. And I think most of us want to help other people around us when they're upset, and most of us want to be helped when we're not upset. And it's just a question of the how to do it and how formalized it is. What you said for me was kind of poignant, right? This idea that often we think about seeking specialized help when really what we need is a relationship, a good, strong, connected, supportive relationship.
Beautifully said. Thank you. As you know, I am very interested in how the ability to both lead and follow each other helps to create supportive, connected relationships, whether they're at home or at work. And I know you've explored how to do that on a very deep level, specifically around the practice of listening, which I think of as a foundational following skill. I wonder if you would agree with that, if you see it that way, and how you think of listening as it pertains to supportive relationships.
Yeah, I think listening is following. I think sometimes, listening comes before we speak, and sometimes, it kind of sets up the dynamic of the conversation to then switch so that the other person is leading. We start talking, the other person listens. But I think listening itself is very much an active following, not just sitting there while the airwaves hit our ears, but really paying attention and trying to understand and working to listen without thinking about the next thing we're going to say. Good listening, I think, is a form of meditation. Like very explicitly, this is not an analogy. I think it is a form of meditation. The whole point of meditation, and to my mind, meditation is when I sit down and I fail to focus, and then I try again. The act of trying again is the practice of meditation. I think that's why it's called practice, right? We don't do meditation. We practice meditation because we're not going to get it. And so the first few years, I think, that I practiced meditation, I felt like I was doing it wrong because I couldn't just sit there and be 100% focused for more than, 30 milliseconds. And then later on, I developed this more, I guess, optimistic view of meditation or more self-forgiving. I don't know what it is, but the sense that like me catching myself failing and double quotes, me catching myself distracted is me succeeding at meditation, because that's the moment of waking up, seeing, oh, I strayed away. Let's come back. And learning to deal with my initial reaction to that, right? Am I frustrated that I got distracted? Am I upset? Am I discouraged? And now more and more easily being able to say, oh, I got distracted. Let's come back to the focus, whatever the focus is, right? The breath and object or whatever. And that's been a very nice transition for me from kind of self-judgment to more like, oh, this is happening. Let's go back to doing this. And that is the practice of meditation. And so for me, listening is very much a form of meditation because I'm trying my best to listen and pay attention and follow. And inevitably thoughts sprout in my head and things that I want to be saying. But to be able to focus back and say, no, I'm just listening. When I'm meditating alone in my room, I'm sitting, and I focus or I don't focus and I distract or don't distract. Like there's no consequence. But if I'm trying to listen to someone, when I get distracted, I realize I'm distracted and I come back. If I spend a lot of time kicking myself for getting distracted, I'm still missing out on what the other person is saying. I'm still stuck in my head, right? And so that skill of learning to very quickly dispense with the self-flagellation, to very quickly move away from that and just say, oh, this happened, let's come back. This actually has implications in this kind of interpersonal meditation.
I really, really love how you're describing listening as a form of meditation. And for me, I think that's already one of the most beautiful takeaways from this conversation. I want to connect it back to the idea of people helping people in almost a common everyday sense. Can you talk a little more about the very human impulse to help one another and how listening can perhaps help us to be more helpful, so to speak, in those situations?
I do believe that most of us want to help other people, and I think the motivations are varied. Often we want to help people because we want to help them, because we care about their experience. And sometimes we want to help people because we want to feel like we are powerful and agentic enough to influence other people in this positive way, in this case. And I have the ability to help you. That feels good. It means I'm capable of doing something, maybe even for you or to you. And I think there's also a third motivation when people want to help people, which is because I care about you so much that when I realize you're in pain, I feel pain. Mm. And I want to help you in order to reduce my empathic pain. All of these motivations are fine if they end up with helping people. Like, I don't care that's fine. You know,
Outcome-based.
outcome-based morality. Yeah, totally. Like, I don't care why you want to be a trauma surgeon,
Right.
long as you're helping people, that's fine. And in the same sense,
Mm-hmm.
the motivation for helping, if it's any one of those three or others, that's fine if it results in helping. The problem is, I think that some of those lead to more short-sighted forms of helping or attempts to help. And I think most commonly what happens is this third category, when we want to help people because we feel pain, when we see them upset, we try to quickly shut down their upset, right? And that rarely goes well, right? When we try to solve their problem quickly, we give them the obvious solution, we tell them not to be upset, we explain to them why it's not actually so upsetting, we encourage them to compare themselves to other people that have it much worse. And all these things can help, but usually not right away, not if it's the first thing being done. So I do think people want to help people for all kinds of reasons. And I think ultimately, I believe people care. And if they know how to help, they will, as long as it's not too, costly for them.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that the different parts of that motivation can end up creating an impulse for different kinds of ways to support. And that's where we need to think more carefully.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense. So correct me if I'm not understanding this well. So the skill of listening or practicing, right, bringing oneself back to the listening over and over again, that can increase the chances of good help, because then we're not always going to jump to the obvious, like, oh, here's the answer, here's the solution, but we get more information so that we might be able to help in a better way.
Yes, I think that those align. And I'll take a quick disclaimer, which I think is important to say. I don't actually think I know everything about listening or about helping people or all of that, right? So like all this is my opinion. My opinion is based on stuff I've seen or heard or read or experienced, but I'm not, so if I talk in ways that seem like I believe in absolute truths, I don't. I'm very open to being wrong. One of my favorite experiences is realizing what an idiot I've been 2 years ago, regardless of what the date is today. I really worry about the time when I think I made that choice 2 years ago. Yeah, I would have done exactly the same today. I'm like, that's a problem. I learned nothing these 2 years. Okay, having said all this, yes, I think that listening well is extremely helpful for the other person. And to focus on listening and listening alone and not trying to solve connects us to this motivation for helping, or helps us be more aligned with this motivation for helping that is for the other person's sake, more than for any other reason. I think that the main thing we want when we're upset, I think, is connection. I think connection is really healing. And I think one of the biggest fears that we have is being alone and not having a choice about it. And I think that when we're upset, we want to be seen and heard and cared for and accepted. And we don't want to be, changed and told and done to, and so on. And so I think that the act of listening, paradoxically, is the most important form of healing we can offer when people are acutely upset. And then after that, they become less upset. And then we can do all the other stuff, right? Talk and suggest and ask questions and all of that. But yeah, that initial focus on listening, there's a paradox there, right? Because if I say listening is a form of meditation, meditation is very kind of me focused. I'm monitoring what's happening. I'm trying to catch myself being distracted and coming back. But at the same time, I think it's the best way to be focused on the other person. The object of the meditation, as it were, is the other person's experience, right? And so when I'm focusing as much as I can on your experience when you're talking and keeping just a little bit of my awareness available to catch myself when I drift away and bring myself back, I think that's my best chance of actually remaining focused on you, which in turn is the best chance I have of helping you feel heard, seen, connected, cared for, and putting us on this road to feeling better.
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that. I want to ask you a little bit about like the how, but before we get there, I wonder why more of us don't do this. Do you think it's just that we want to relieve our own empathic pain, as you mentioned before, that we're kind of having a virtual experience of suffering, so to speak, when we observe someone else struggling? Or is it lack of training, lack of modeling, or?
I think it's all of the above. I think so. To add to the previous disclaimer of me not knowing everything, I'll also add now that I don't always practice what I preach.
Right.
Right? I would like to, but I don't. And so why do I sometimes give advice before hearing out? Sometimes it's just a sense of time pressure and the illusion that if I just get my advice in, I can just solve this. Time pressure, I think, is just a horrible thing. I think time pressure is the killer of relationships. It's the killer of thoughtfulness. It's the killer of, patience. And so if somebody's bringing up a problem that I think I can solve and I'm pressured for time, I'll just try to solve it and move on, which typically doesn't solve it at all when the difficulty underneath it is more relational or more emotional, not the identified problem at hand. So I think time pressure is one reason. I think modeling is another one. Like we did grow up doing other things and seeing other forms of relating. And so that's what we do. I think definitely the empathic pain is a big part of it. I think for a lot of people, you see your child cry and you run over and you say, don't cry. And what does that mean exactly? Why are we saying don't cry? Right? That's such a deep, important question to my mind, right? Like, what are we hoping, your friend runs into a wall, sits down, face bleeding, and you're like, don't bleed. Like, how would that solve any? But that's the instinct we all have. Don't cry. And I don't think we're saying don't cry. I don't think at a conscious level, at least, we're not saying don't cry. It makes me upset. Don't upset me. I don't think that's what we're saying. What we want to say is like, please magically feel better. I want you to feel better because I'm upset seeing you this, because I don't want you to be upset. Like, please just fix it quickly.
Yes, please fix it quickly.
But done out of great caring, right? So I think it's this combination of what we learned growing up and seeing around us, the empathic pain that we need solved. And, maybe just in general, one part of the human condition is the short-term orientation. It's hard to believe in the benefit of things that take a while to bear fruit. And if you're upset now and we're talking, I want to do something that makes you feel better right now over doing something that maybe will see you remaining upset for 10 minutes and then being less upset, right? And there's this illusion that I can say something or do something that'll solve you right now. And even though it hardly ever works, I'll keep trying it, right? Because it's easier than doing this other thing, which keeps you looking upset for a while. During this whole time, I need to bear with the fact that you might be upset and only see you getting better later. And I think that's why, an opportunity to get some kind of experience with this is so helpful, because it's kind of hard to imagine doing it until you've at least seen it work. Then you say, oh, this makes a lot of sense. It's kind of like, when you go to a physical therapist and they give you some exercise and they say you need to stretch for 4 weeks before you see results. You're like, oh, okay. But after you've done it once, you're like, I'm going back to this physical therapist and I'll take a 4-week stretching regimen for sure.
Yeah. It reminds me again of the meditation analogy, which you made, where it can seem excruciating to sit with yourself for even like 30 seconds. But once you build your tolerance for that process of being unsettled or watching your thoughts wander or being tormented by your thoughts, or, people have all manner of experiences with sitting meditation, you build a tolerance over time, or you relate to the practice differently. And I don't know, it's just striking me for myself, that feels similar to building my tolerance with listening to someone who's upset, or being okay with it taking a little longer, and not solving it immediately. Could we venture a little bit into the how? Because I know you've created a lot of programs around supportive listening in particular, and people helping people. Could you speak a little bit about how you went about identifying what those things were, or what they look like in practice?
Yeah, the short version of the history is actually I'll go a step back than I thought I would. I remember when I was preparing to apply for graduate school in psychology, and I was reading this prep book that talks about different schools of therapy, and I came across humanistic psychology, and that was my first ever introduction to it. And it was like a one-line, summary of each school. Like, here's CBT, here's dialectical, here's humanistic, and humanistic said something like, the therapist provides unconditional positive regard for the client, regardless of what the client expresses, in order to support the client's growth. And I remember reading this, walking down the street. I remember where I was. I was reading this in the street, looking down. There were no smartphones then because that was before dirt was invented. And I remember thinking, that's idiotic. Or you're just going to say, sure, great, yeah, to everybody, and then they'll just get better. You're just reinforcing what they're already. So, of course, 4 years later or something, like I'm in the middle of graduate school, and I got super interested in how people help people and looked into the research on it. And there's a ton of research about how important it is to have good support and people who care about you and accept you and all of that. And there's very little research about what makes people feel like the person in front of them cares about them and accepts them. And it's a lot of what, very little how. And so I thought, let's just try different stuff. And so I found, whatever little research I could and borrowed a huge amount from humanistic psychology at that point from the techniques and did workshops for, I think we called it How to Be a Friend initially. Like I literally put flyers up on campus, around campus, and sometime in town. And like people would come. It was heartwarming. People were like, yeah, I want to learn how to be a better friend. We talked about how to do supportive interactions. And then from there it grew, and over the years I started formalizing this and I started doing work with physicians about building good relationships with patients and with colleagues, and then worked with teachers about how to build good relationships with students, and then started doing a lot of work with, now a lot of that is focused on parents and parenting, but it's always basically the same stuff. So the how, the core of the how basically is spend a lot of time following. I literally call it that in the materials. It used to be that I said there are three big chunks to every conversation conceptually. There's setup, where we actually focus and lose the distractions, and then there's listening, and then there's talking. And then after a while of thinking about it, a few years ago, I changed it in my mind to set up, following, and leading, because it doesn't matter who's talking, right? Sometimes, I talk and you listen, and maybe you tell me back what you heard or understand, but you're following as I'm talking, and then we switch, and then you talk and I listen. So I think about it really explicitly in terms of setup, following, talking. And the main techniques in following is first the internal process of this listening as meditation, right? Just trying to focus and losing the internal distractions, just focusing on what the other person says. And the tool to support that is paraphrasing, which is what everybody has been taught since they were little. I call it wig. Paraphrasing is a really long word, so I call it wig or wigging. Wig is what I got. That's what I got.
Nice.
So you talk and I wig, and you talk and I wig. That's the main tool. And the general idea is that when people have big emotions inside of them, they can't really process any additional information. When somebody else is upset, there's no point in trying to get them to think differently or listen to your story or think of solutions even. Like, it's just not the right time. They're too upset. And so all we do is help them be less upset. And when they're less upset, we can start suggesting solutions, sharing stories, and all of that. And so the idea is that to help someone be less upset, we follow. And when they're done being upset, we check if it's okay to lead. And that's when we can help. But the leading, we feel good giving advice, but they feel good when we listen. Giving advice is almost for us.
I am so intrigued that you've broken down that way, set up, follow, and then lead. And I'd love to hear you maybe talk a little more about the relationship between following and leading, why it's so important to follow first.
Why follow before lead? The premise here that somebody's upset and we're talking with them and we want to help them. And another premise or assumption here is that when people are upset, they can't process new information. And so if we try to change how they feel, if we try to solve them, we usually end up sort of fighting their charge. Say, do this. They're like, no. And we say, how about this? They're like, I don't know. And eventually either we get annoyed because they're not trying to be, they're not hearing us, or they're insisting on being upset, or however we phrase it, or they get annoyed because they don't feel listened, and maybe we give advice that's irrelevant for their situation or whatever. Underneath it all, I believe, is really the simple truth that when we're upset, we want to be understood and held. And when we're not upset, we can work on things to change reality, right? But first we accept reality, or we want our reality accepted, and then we're willing to start working on changing our reality. Following allows us to say it differently. Following is the phase of the conversation, of the interaction, where we're giving the other person's charge an opportunity to be expressed and released. So that's really on an abstract, energetic level. You can think about it like in a martial arts analogy, as a martial arts analogy too, right? Somebody's coming at you with a lot of charge. You don't just meet it and break it. You could. Some styles do that, right? Or you could try to kind of give them the runaround until the energy is expanded. Mm-hmm. And then you have your way with them. So so that's on like I said, on an abstract energetic level. We want to let the charge out. And following does that, right? When you say, I had a horrible day, everybody was mean to me at the office. And I go, oh, well, did you tell them that they shouldn't blah? You're like, well, that's not helpful, right? So this is me trying to immediately lead the conversation, as opposed to you saying, I had a horrible day at the office. Everybody was really mean to me. And I go, oh, what happened? And you say, well, one guy said that I did this thing late. And then this other lady said that every time that I do a thing, da-da-da. And then I try to follow. And I say, so both of them were criticizing the way you work and the things that you do there. And you're like, yeah. And then they blah, blah, blah. This is really common, right? When we're charged, the charge wants to express itself. We just the other person is paying attention, basically. Mm-hmm. So the following is helpful in this regard. The charge just gets released. But there's another important reason why following is important, which is people don't always talk about the thing that is really bothering them, that's really causing them to be upset. They don't always bring it up first. Sometimes they don't even know what is exactly the thing that's upsetting. And if we listen to them well, they can find out, right?
Yeah.
So somebody might start by talking about work and how things are upsetting there, and we listen carefully. And after a while, the person might say, yeah, and I don't like it there. Mm-hmm. And maybe we listen really hard for a long time as they talk about this, and eventually they end up saying something like, I just don't feel I'm contributing. I mean, in general, I mean, in life or whatever, right? And it can go.
Yeah, it goes deeper.
Yeah, it can go deeper. Sometimes it can jump sideways. It could be like, yeah, I guess I got upset because it really reminded me of that time when this other thing happened. So if we start leading too soon, we end up at the wrong destination. We end up at where we thought the conversation was going instead of where the other person was taking the conversation.
Solving the wrong problem, so to speak.
Yes, exactly. And oftentimes, especially if there's a topic that I'm not quite comfortable talking about yet, if you give me an out, I'll take it. Right? If I want to talk to you about how, work isn't going well, but really I'm upset because I feel like I'm a waste of oxygen. And you start problem solving work with me, I might take you up on it. I might go in the direction you're pointing because I'm so afraid of exploring this notion that I feel like a total irrelevance in the world or whatever it is. Right. So I want to follow to make sure that we're reaching your destination and that we're keeping all options open to you. And in following, we build this trust in real time where the other person at some point, again, understands consciously or unconsciously that we are following, that they are in the driver's seat, and they start talking about all these different things that matter to them because we're not constraining, we're not leading. And
yeah, I find it so useful how you described the leader role in this context as the one expressing, right? And so the more you follow, the more you invite to be expressed, and you make safe to express maybe something a few layers down. But if you don't offer that invitation, then the thing doesn't rise to the surface, or it doesn't present itself to be expressed.
Yeah, perfect.
Really powerful. Eran, before you finish, I wonder if you would be willing to talk about your Parenting for Humans program, which I'm so intrigued by. And I know a lot of these themes have, been woven into that program.
Yeah, sure. For a lot of people, the relationship they have with their child is, first of all, one of the most important relationships they have in their lives. And secondly, it's one of the most mysterious ones in some ways, because we come in with all these assumptions of what it should be like and how it works, and then reality happens. And the goal of Parenting for Humans is to give parents really concrete tools for having a good, functional relationship with their kids. So not just feel good all the time, but actually have it be fruitful, right? How do you help your child build good habits? How do you have more cooperation and help around the house and with each other? How to comfort your child when your child is upset? And my personal belief and my personal experience is that interaction with one's kids can be and feel positive much of the time and still be very fruitful. So how can we enjoy our relationship with our kids while being the kind of parent that we want to be for our kids? And so that's the focus there. So the focus is a lot of really practical tools, a lot of practice and skill building, and thinking about parenting as being made up of a lot of micro skills woven together by a general philosophy of relationship first. When I say relationship first, I mean this really in a kind of a literal way. I think when a relationship between any two people, in this case, parent and child, right? But when a relationship is good, everything becomes easy. And when a relationship is difficult, everything becomes difficult between these two people. Right? And if you have a good relationship with your kid will cooperate more, will forgive you more, will disclose more to you and be more vulnerable with you. Like just everything good happens when the relationship is better. And so there's a lot of focus on how do we strengthen the relationship and how do we prioritize it? And when do we prioritize it and when do we not? When is it worth sacrificing relationship points? My answer, spoiler alert, is very rarely, right?
Yeah.
Prioritize the relationship. So the philosophy is prioritizing the relationship. The philosophy is avoiding harm, psychic harm, which hurts the relationship. And then there's a lot of micro skills. How do we do it? How do we build a relationship? How do we show the child, oh, we care about you? How do we show the child we respect you and your autonomy or your power, and at the same time still get their cooperation as this is happening? So a lot of how with philosophy on top.
You can pass on this question if you want, but if you were going to leave podcast listeners with one of those little skills to practice, what might you offer?
Okay, I'll say two, and you can delete whichever one you don't like.
I'm going to keep them both.
So one skill is being explicit about our goodwill toward our child. We assume telepathy a lot between us and people that we care about. We assume they know we care about them and that we do things because we want to help them. And it's really good to be explicit. So I have a 4-year-old son, and I'll give you an example. A couple of weeks ago, it was about time to leave, to go for preschool for him, and he wanted to watch another video. And I said, we can watch another video, but I think it's not a good idea. I think if we do this, we're going to get there after they're done playing in the playground. Mm. And I know how much you love going to the playground. He's like, no, I want to watch the video. And I said, okay. And we watched the video because I'm fine with these kinds of consequences happening. Mm-hmm. He made a choice, and I gave him the choice, and he took it, which for me is a way of communicating respect for his autonomy and so on. Mm-hmm. It's but he can learn. So we went there, and indeed we got there too late. He was a little upset. Mm-hmm. And when I picked him up and spoke with him, not in an I told you so kind of way, but I said, hey, do you remember when we watched a video and we wanted to watch? And I told him the same story I told you now. And he said, yeah, I remember. And I said, and you remember that I said, I think it's not a good idea. Mm-hmm. And he said, yeah. And I said, do you know why? And he said, because, I don't know, maybe he said something like, we would miss playground time mm-hmm. or something. And I said, yeah. So, and this is the part that I was driving at the whole time. Mm-hmm. So I kind of, as I knelt down and looked him in the eye and I said, so I really hope you know that if I say no, or if I'm suggesting that it's not a good idea to do something, I'm doing it only because I want you to be able to have this thing that I know you want. Mm. Like in this case, I know you wanted to play with your friends in the playground. And that's why I said that it's not a good idea mm-hmm. to see another video. Okay. I'm not saying it just because that's what I want. I'm doing it because I'm on your side. I want you to be able to have what you want. Okay. And he said, okay. Mm. And it stuck. Like other times, he started accepting much more quickly what I'm suggesting. And I'm still very explicit about why I'm saying no to things. Mm-hmm. What's the bigger yes behind it, right? But being able to communicate explicitly, I'm on your side, I'm on your team, and not just saying it, but giving examples.
Yeah.
I think being able to express this explicitly and give explicit examples is a great way to build goodwill in the relationship. Mm. I think it's really, really important that kids have the explicit thought in their head. My parent is helping me with the things I want. My parent is taking care of me, doing these things to help me. So that's one. And then the other thing that I really encourage parents to do is to explicitly consult with and negotiate with their kids. Mm. Because I think that communicates a huge amount of respect, right? So rather than saying, here's what you have to do, to say, I would really love for you to do this. What do you think? Or, if there are chores around the house that need to be done, rather than saying, okay, I need you to start cleaning the dishes or something, to say, I would love some help around the house. I'm doing a lot of these things, and there are also other things that I want to do. Mm-hmm. And so here are the 4 things. Which of these do you feel like you can help with? Mm-hmm. Something like that, right? But more negotiating. And if the kid says, this is a lot, to say, well, what can you do, mm-hmm. right? And start from a place of agreement and then slowly build up from there. But just spend more time negotiating and spend more time consulting, asking for advice, asking for opinions. Mm. It's such a great way to show respect and show that you take it into consideration. And again, that builds goodwill. And as you treat them, they treat you. So these are my 2 suggestions. Be explicit about how you're a team mm-hmm. and spend more time negotiating and consulting.
Eran, thank you so much for sharing those 2 very practical and concrete suggestions. I see your work as so incredibly valuable, in part for this reason, because it's so actionable. And I really appreciate how you've invested so much time into understanding those practical hows of helping and supporting. That's so often what makes the difference, right, is the how more than the what. So before we close here, please share with listeners how they can find out more about Parenting for Humans.
The website is parentingforhumans.com. It all sort of starts there. And there are workshops that happen regularly. I do free workshops. So if any listener here wants to make a workshop for their community or their school or for their parent group mm-hmm. or for their whoever, you can just go on the website and book a workshop. It's actually free. I'm very happy to do it. We do it online, right? So it's easy to teleport in and out. So parentingforhumans.com is the place to go.
Wonderful. Thank you. I will put that URL in the show notes and strongly encourage listeners to check it out. I'll also note here that Eran has a number of excellent articles on that same website that you can read to become more familiar with his work. So make a little time for that in your schedule. I think you'll be glad you did. Eran, thank you again for your time. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Yeah, me too. Thank you very much, Sharna.
You have been listening to the Lead and Follow podcast. Special thanks to Glover Gill for composing our music, and a huge thank you to all of you who support the show. It really means a lot. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend or consider joining the Lead and Follow fan club for as little as $3 a month. There's a link at the bottom of the show notes.